Okay. Oh, I thought you brought your own. I use a pen.
They can be.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rsvl Rotary. I'm pleased to see you all online and live here. Would you please rise with me and we'll start our flag pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
The republic for which it stands.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Someone online is not muted, and so you're a little lagged. You may be seated. I have today's invocation, although I'll say it's really more of an inspiration, I hope. I've been a member of this club for 6 years, and the 4-way test has really helped to shape my character. I have to confess, I probably recited that thing a couple hundred times before I realized, hey, this applies to my personal life too, and not just to this single hour that I'm here each week. But I do find myself listening a lot more and trying to understand other people's viewpoints and posting on social media a lot less. And lately I've been reflecting a lot on what it means to build goodwill and better friendships. At club meetings, we hear from a variety of speakers, and we don't always agree with what a speaker says. As Rotarians, however, we strive to live out our 4-way test, knowing that making the world a better place can start with us. As your president this year, I want to challenge you to utilize the 4-way test in your personal and professional lives. We want our club meetings to be welcoming, friendly, informative, a great place to visit both online and in person. We do want to challenge the parts of our character that need to change in order to strive for fairness to all concerned. To help with this, I'm implementing a change to our meetings. From now on, we'll only use the chat feature on Zoom if a speaker specifically requests it. If you have questions for the speaker, just wait to the end like you would do if you're in person. What I don't want is for you to feel like you can't speak your mind. But what I do want is for you to be heard in a way that keeps you respected in the group, keeps the conversation going, and gets you what you need. I'm eager to hear from our speaker today. Paul will be speaking to us about goodness and give us some compelling reasons why to choose goodness in our responses. So let's pause for just a moment, and I would love for you to take an opportunity to think about a tangible action that you could do today to build goodwill and better friendships. Maybe you could shoot a colleague an email or a text or drop a card in the mail or pick up the phone. But let's just pause for maybe 30 seconds and think about a tangible action that you can do to demonstrate goodwill.
So I have an idea. It's just not a plan, but as a immigrant myself to come here and really, we have such a multi-diverse cultures, and I really like to put our mindset with everybody that's coming from different culture, and if we get into other culture, we don't feel comfortable because it's better that we're with same kinds of, mannerism and everything. But it just, we open our mind to accept everybody with a welcoming heart and accepting who they are. I think that's a good place to start with. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank our record reporter today, Lauren Swanson. And Kathy, do you have our historical snapshot for today? We'll put that up. And Kathy found some pictures from our state fair activities. Oh, I love the one of Colleen and Roger. That's fun. That just be there. Oh, those are great. So I kind of missed it this year, but hopefully next year we'll be back at it. All right, Jenny. Is Jenny in there yet? Yep. Jenny, did you want to pass on your above and beyond pin yet?
Yes, I do. And I would like to recognize this individual by telling a little story. So when I was a child, we spent all kinds of time up at my grandparents' house. And in their garden, they had one of those old pump wells. We had city water, but my grandpa being the kind of funny one, we would have to go out there and we'd try to pump it and no water would come. Until we all got on our hands and knees and said, "Come water, come water." And pretty soon the water would start coming out. Well, it was years and years later when I realized that my grandma would sort of disappear, go down in the basement and flip the switch for the water to come on. She was the behind the scenes entertainer. My grandpa was the front man. I want to pass the inspiration pin to an individual who is very much behind the scenes. And so I had asked Kathy to send me a list of everybody who had gotten the inspiration pin. And as I looked at that list, I thought, well, there's definitely somebody who's missing. And this is somebody who really holds this club together, somebody who makes sure that everything is moving smoothly. She is incredible about following up. When you ask her to do something, she's done it almost the second you ask her to do it. And so today I very much am inspired and grateful and incredibly thankful for Kathy, because she really does inspire me and hold this club together. So Kathy, surprise, thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, we have probably a good 5 minutes here for some happy dollars. Is anybody?
I have one.
Okay.
Okay. Yesterday, I was on Korean TV program for 50 minutes, almost hour, at this, on my way to meet you. This is a North Korean refugee program with the celebrities. But I put a Rotary Club, our friends. I have a picture of us at one of the function. We were having a good time, and I sent that picture to them. Lauren and Jen, and so all of us were in this. We were drinking beer, and they put that on the picture, on the TV program, and I brag about Rotary Club helping funding for North Korean refugee girl to come here to study English. So they put that on with you guys' picture, and nominee who is coming here was on the program, but I didn't mention it. But we just to talk about it. But it was so nice to see our friends. I may send it out to you guys or in the Facebook that your face was on major Korean TV program and say Rotary Club. So $20 for my happy dollars.
This is Lynn. If I can follow up on that for a moment, if I can share my screen for one quick moment, I'm going to do that. And see if I can share my screen here. I had it up here, and it's not showing at the moment. Whoops.
Try again.
I don't know that I can share my screen here.
Kathy just made you co-host, so you should.
Okay. Is it shared?
No.
No. Okay. Let me try share screen again for a moment. I'm not going to get this. Am I still there? I'm still with you?
Your screen's not shared yet.
Okay, let's try this one more time.
Sorry.
Maybe it won't. Okay, I'm going to pass. I'm sorry to take up the time. I had it on my screen, but I can't get my screen to share.
You can tell us the gist of it?
Well, it's the Rotary Club picture within that TV show. So it's a Korean TV show, but just to know that it's had 18 to 20,000 hits on it. So the Rotary Club of Roseville has gone around the world. Even somebody in England had seen it. So
It's about
exciting.
40 50,000.
Happy, and we'll put it in this lineup. So thank you. All right, we should move on here. Does anybody else have a happy dollar? Yeah, you can stand in front of this camera here.
In front of the camera.
Uh-huh.
It's a well pump, happy dollar. I was putting together a proposal a couple weeks ago for a convenience store in Cartwright, North Dakota. It's near the Montana border. And I went to Google and I went down to the website or the street view on Google Maps. And there's a well pump in the middle of Main Street where the road actually splits left and right to go around this well pump. So Jenny, if you are inclined, you might enjoy seeing that photo.
Here's the happy dollar bucket. Here's for happy dollars online, people, just so you know. All right, I think we'll move on now. Thank you all so much. Does anyone have any announcements? A meeting with no announcements. Look at that. All right, well, Jenny, would you be so kind as to introduce our speaker for today?
You bet. Today it's Paul Batts, and Paul is changing the conversation about the value of leadership. He founded Good Leadership Enterprises to help CEOs, business owners, executives, and community leaders grow with the idea that goodness pays. Paul's not-so-secret sauce is demonstrating how excellence, generosity, fairness, and positivity are rewarded with great business results. Paul's personal mission is to help leaders and employees thrive together by building the 7 F's: faith, family, finances, fitness, friends, fun, and future into their leadership. He uses proprietary Goodness Pays research as the subject for coaching, speaking, and inspirational programming. Paul is a prolific blogger and author of 8 books. And outside of work, he is hopelessly addicted to golf, an Elton John wannabe piano player, a philanthropist, and he loves hosting dinner parties with his wife and business partner, Melinda, at their home in Bloomington. Welcome, my friend, Paul.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm assuming you can hear me. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I'm delighted. I consider Jenny to be a really good friend. She's participated in many of the events that we've done over the last 10 years. And I'm very fond of the organization that she runs. And I'm also very fond of Rotary. For 25 years, I was a member of the Minneapolis City of Lakes Rotary Club that meets at the Minneapolis Club in downtown Minneapolis. Obviously, they meet virtually now. And my sponsor was Russ Mickelitz, who was the recent district governor of 5950. And I gave him a text this morning telling him I was going to address you today. And he said, it's his personal mission to get me back into Rotary. So thank you very much for the opportunity. My conversation today is about a subject that I think is very relevant. I'll make sure I can move a little bit so you can see the full slides here. Just as Rotary has gone virtual, I run a service business that was previously pretty much driven by getting executive teams together and creating alignment and commitment. And I did a lot of traveling, and it was almost all getting people in a room together. And of course, we're not really doing that anymore. But what we're learning is that, very similar to how when I started my business 10.5 years ago, this subject of goodness is really compelling. So why don't you dial yourself back 10 years ago? when I first had the idea to leave the job I had as president of another firm and start this firm, I'll tell you what caused that in just a second. But the times were dark. We were, living through the first real financial crisis of most of our lifetimes. Very few of us remember the Great Depression. I knew a lot about it from my grandparents and my father-in-law and things like that. But, our banking system was in collapse, and most leaders that I knew and worked with at that time, their lives were really hurting. It was a really dark place. But we know now that it wasn't quite the same as what we're going through now, because today the emergence of social media makes it so much easier to share that darkness. And then also places that we used to frequent to help ourselves feel better, like restaurants and movie theaters and things like that. They were still open and thriving. But here we are now in a place in time that none of us could ever really imagine. And there's this thing that we call the dark noise, and it's very well documented that Americans are losing trust in the institutions that used to knit us together in a way that was really unique around the world. And that is, we're losing trust in government. We're losing trust in organized religion. We're losing trust in big businesses. And we're also losing trust specifically in the media. And so in just about a decade's time period, those things have really changed. And now that it's so easy to send information back and forth with our cell phones and on all sorts of media, it seems like the negative stuff, the political bickering, the news about natural disasters, about fraud, obviously about racial injustice and violence. My daughter Anna just moved home from Chicago yesterday. She lived in the Loop in Chicago, and that's been the source of the most violent looting other than in Portland. And so she just finished graduate school and came home the next day. So our lives are really kind of consumed with all this dark noise. And it's one of the reasons why I think focusing on goodness is something that it's good for Rotary clubs, it's good for our families, it's good for our personal health, and it's also good for our businesses. And that's really the lens that I speak with. I own an executive coaching firm, and we help our clients grow with the idea of goodness. But it's reasonable to ask the question, somebody who does executive coaching, where in the heck did I get so fascinated with goodness? Here's a photograph of my grandmother, two of them actually. In the 1920s, she was an opera singer. She was an opera star. She sang on the Chicago radio hour, the opera hour in Chicago, for about a half a decade. And ultimately it was violence due to the Al Capone gang that literally led her back home. She married her junior high school sweetheart, and they raised a family in a community in Northwest Iowa called Lakeview. She was an extraordinary human being. She lived to the age of 103. Like most grandmothers, they're special people. She was also just this extraordinary human being. She was a scholar, an author, a virtuoso piano player. And after her husband died, at the age of 89, she had a triple bypass surgery at the Mayo Clinic. At that time, she was the oldest living human being to ever survive that surgery. They did the surgery because she was so sharp they couldn't not do it. So she played the organ in the church till she was 95 years old when they took her car keys away. And on the day she died, which was March 17, 2009, she called me. I was running a professional services firm at that time. It was extremely stressful. Our firm was spiraling downward like this. And I always had a real kind of soul-like connection to my grandmother. And she called me and said, "Hey, Paul, I've lived a really good life and I'm tired. And I'm calling you because you're my first grandchild. I'm calling all my grandchildren this morning, and I have a message for you." And her message was this. She said, "Paul, you are a good man, and the world needs good men like you to spread goodness. That's it. I love you. Goodbye." And she hung up. And I remember it was 7:15 in the morning. It was a Tuesday. And I remember thinking to myself, what the heck am I going to do with that? And my wife looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm not sure." I got home after work that night and she'd already passed. So for several months, I walked around with that in my head. And one of the things I decided to do was to ask my clients. Remember, everyone was hurting. Our businesses were terrible. We always had kind of this aching soul about us. And so I started to ask people, do you still believe goodness pays? And without a doubt, people would respond immediately with a yes or no. And most people, 4 out of 5 would say, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to get through this. Everything's going to be fine. And then a few people would say, I'm just not sure. But one thing I learned is that while all the rest of my colleagues who were doing executive coaching work, their businesses were really, really hurting, my business was doing okay. I got people focused on something other than just their financial woes. And I would talk about, well, if you see goodness, how can you help that grow? And eventually I came up with the idea that it would be, my life would be better if I started my own firm. And that firm is called Good Leadership Enterprises. And one of the first things I did when we started the firm is I invited a bunch of people to breakfast. And it was a buy your own breakfast. I wasn't going to pay for everybody. And we discussed that question as a group. And lo and behold, when we were done, there were 73 people who showed up to that meeting. I ran it sort of like a Rotary meeting. Remember, I was a Rotarian at the time. And when we got done, somebody raised their hand and said, hey, when are we going to do this again? And I hadn't planned on doing it again, but we ended up doing it over and over again for 10 and a half years, 84 meetings. And we started this thing called the Good Leadership Breakfast Series. And that's how I met my friend Jenny. So in the time frame, I just decided that people have built businesses off of sillier ideas than goodness. But what I had to do is to work on how do you take a concept that's normally talked about in terms of religious terms, or in, everybody that's into nutritious food talks about it as pure goodness these days. How do I build a management science off of these concepts around goodness? And what we had to do is to articulate our claim that if you lead with goodness, you will get better business results faster. And probably today, the most important concept is easier, because it is difficult to get the same kind of results today just because of the COVID environment and doing all these things over Zoom calls and stuff like that. So I'm really, really lucky in the fact that I've collected so many interesting friends and family members and colleagues and clients that as soon as I started talking about this inspiration kind of dropped in my lap for a research project that resulted in this book. I'm lucky in the fact that I know and used to have as clients both Richard Davis, who ran US Bank, and also Greg Page, who ran Cargill for quite a while. And these were two people that in general just really, really liked this idea of goodness. And they, in their own mind, they modeled themselves as good leaders who radiated goodness in their work. And so one day I had breakfast with Richard Davis in the IDS Crystal Court. We were in that restaurant that kind of looks down over the court. And he said to me, what can I do to help you with your mission? And I said, I think I need to do a research project very similar to what Jim Collins did when he wrote Built to Last and then Good to Great after that. And he said, give me a little time. And I said, help me, please. Develop a group of people that will invest in this project. And so we did. And we did a project that lasted almost 5 years long. And you can see on the bottom of the book, I had a co-author whose name is Paul Hillen. Paul Hillen was a coaching client of mine 14 years ago. He was an executive who was very, very successful at Cargill, but he really had an edge to him. People loved his results. They just didn't like how he got those results. When he asked me to describe his leadership style, I used these words. I said, you know what? You are a bag of hammers. You get the job done, but at what cost is the question. And so he embraced this idea of goodness, and then ultimately we became friends. And as a world-class marketer, he did the research design and helped us figure out how do we turn goodness as a soft and squishy concept that a lot of people don't want to talk about. How do we turn that actually into a management discipline? So we did a huge research project, and probably one of the most important things we found was this definition. So we realized after talking to people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, that the definition of when people thrive together, so when we thrive together, not alone, in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork, when we lay that out and people see this, they say, yep, that's goodness. And from that place, we were able to start doing some really, really structured research to find out, okay, in organizations, excuse me, where employees would say, our leaders lead with goodness and we consistently get really, really good financial results, what do? So we did an online survey of about 900 leaders and a whole bunch of focus groups and panels, and we landed on these 5 factors. And what's interesting about these factors is when we originally did this work, we were focused on mid-sized growth companies. What we've learned now is that it works just as well for a Rotary club, excuse me, or a church, or the businesses that we work with on a regular basis. I'm gonna grab my water, I'll be right here. Thank you for that. So there are 5 things that came up that any of us that run an enterprise, whether it's a tiny little small business or a big, big organization. The first thing is when leaders believe in goodness and they perform financially really well, what employees tell us is that the organization has a compelling plan. You could use the word strategic plan or long-range plan or even just business plan here. But the most important word is compelling. What makes a plan compelling? When people are excited about it, it's simple, they can repeat it, but most of all, they told us a plan is compelling if they helped build it. So this has profound implications for how our clients now are going about building their strategic plan. We recommend that they do create activities where as many people get a chance to provide input and also do some stress testing on the plan. The more people involved, the more compelling it is. Second, this idea that profits need to be healthy for everyone. So thrive together means you're not going to profit at my expense. So employees need to feel like shareholders are winning, the executives are winning, the owners are winning, but also their fellow colleagues. If the organization's doing well, they expect that we're going to share that. Third, this is really indicative of our time. I remember when I first learned how leadership in business, there was a lot of stuff about how I should behave and be strong and tough. The reality is those things are true, but we also expect a culture where people are going to win together. It's not just individual efforts. So we're rewarding team-based accomplishments. The fourth one is timely and transparent decision-making. Here's where pardon me, I'll hold up my my iPhone here. Cultures have changed because of how easily it is for us to get information. And we get really impatient if we can get information about our stock portfolio or our bank account, or we can buy groceries in our phone. If we can't get the information we need from our leaders to be able to do what our jobs are, then we get pretty bothered by that. And usually when we enter in an organization and people are not getting along, it's this one that's being violated. And then finally, magnetic ethics. These are ethics that attract the best talent and a place where people really want to encourage each other. So you go back to encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. If you've got a bunch of negative people who are not encouraging each other, there's something about the ethical profile of the organization that's attracting the wrong kind of people. So 5 goodness pays factors. When we find these things in a healthy way in our client organizations, we can pretty much guarantee they're going to be succeeding financially. When we shared this with Greg Page, this quote I just think is beautiful. In a world where you can't hide anything, you better have nothing to hide. That is very much tied to this idea of goodness and how goodness pays. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, isn't this just common sense? And ultimately, I think it is common sense. Good leaders seem to have an instinctive quality about them to understand some of these things. And primarily, today it means if you want people to be engaged, they need to be involved. And I think what's fascinating about this is that we've been asking executive teams and employee populations, and there's always this gap. Excuse me. The executive teams will say, of course we do these things. And then we ask employees and they say, I don't think we see that so much. And so we invented this very simple tool that came right out of the research. If anybody's familiar with the Net Promoter Score, Net Promoter Score is what marketers use. It's a 1-question survey. And the data is projectable, and it just asks, how likely are you to refer this product or service to another person? And statistically, it's valid and financially predictable based on who says what. This is the same thing with the goodness pays score. What I love about this is GPS is an acronym for that thing in your car, excuse me, that helps you get to where you're going. The GPS question here is really simple. You can ask people unaided, first time, how would you rate your direct leader on proactively promoting goodness in his or her decision making? What we've learned is how people, the average of an employee population answers this, puts leadership, the executive leadership of an organization, in one of three categories. Either they're accelerating the likelihood that we'll have a profitable enterprise and meet our financial goals. They'll be neutral or drainers. What we're learning is that most organizations' leaders fall in the neutral category, which is a good thing because we can help them with coaching get to the right place. When people average 9 or above, the accelerators, there's an 81% probability they're going to hit their financial goals, and also an 18% neutral. So that means 99% are going to have neutral or positive financial results. And can you think of how powerful that data is for the times we're living in right now? Here's the most common thing that we have to work on. That compelling plan thing. When we've surveyed an executive team or an ownership group for the first time, only 52% of them have what we call a compelling plan. The employees are excited about, they understand it, and they feel like they were involved. So we can put some real quick effort into helping people understand how to plan better, how to get people more engaged and more understanding what we're trying to do so everybody can help each other thrive together. We've also discovered that the highest performing cultures have created this environment where people actually care about each other, both personally and professionally. And I think we've really seen a resurgence of just personal care and attention now for one another as colleagues through COVID. The fact that we're not seeing each other on a regular basis. I have to tell you, my heart was just full of joy when I heard the banter back and forth about strange food habits and things here as you were getting to know each other here and getting reacquainted after the week of being away. That's one of my favorite things about Rotary that I miss. But that kind of banter is happening in organizations because we really are curious now, as long as we don't share the same air every day, how are you doing really? The highest performing cultures invest time in that concept. So if we back up and just summarize today, I was inspired by my grandmother to do something that I think is very common sense, which is start talking about goodness as we coach business owners and executive teams through the transformational things they need to do to get to the next level in their organization. We found out some factors that are really simple to identify and measure and build upon. Primarily, it's getting people involved in building the plan to move forward. And what we're learning is one of the most important things in that context is people can get to know each other at a really, really interesting level. Pardon me. Jenny brought this up earlier in the introduction. This concept of the 7 F's. I discovered the 7 F's purely by accident. When I was 35 years old, which now I'm kind of happy to admit was 22 years ago, I put together a personal accountability group. We were a group of people who had big jobs and families, 4 men, 1 woman, and we wanted to help each other succeed both personally and professionally. And after a couple of years of meeting once a month, rotating around to each other's offices, it started to get a little bit stale. We developed enough comfort with one another that we really found that as the one place where we felt like we could dump all of our negativity on each other. My friend Tim Schmidt said, hey, this isn't really working for me anymore. Can we figure out another way to engage this group of people and bring out the best of each other? And he said, I have these 5 words, each that begin with the letter F. And we talk about this in my family every Sunday evening. And I'm wondering if we should try that. And I looked at the 5 F's and said, well, this is a leadership group. We probably should talk about 2 more things. And the next thing we know, we had this list called the 7 F's, alphabetically or organized as faith, family, finances, fitness, friends, fun, and future. Faith is at the beginning, future's at the end, fitness is right in the middle. Well, Tim asked us to each think about the 7 F's at that first meeting and articulate a score where we were 1 through 10 on that. It was measuring our own satisfaction. And instantly, the meeting became consultative. It became encouraging. And we started keeping track of each other's scores. And one guy opened up a laptop and started keeping track of the scores and arbitrarily decided if we were 7 or below, we were going to get a red mark. And he was going to ask us what we were going to do on our 7 F's. So I started using this in my coaching practice. And what I learned was that the relationships got deeper. People paid attention more often. My retention as a coach went way up because we were talking about important things. And this is a technique we've been repeating over and over again for 10.5 years now at Good Leadership, particularly at the Good Leadership Breakfast. If anybody's interested in this concept, you can send me an email at paul@goodleadership. I'll just send it to you. It's also free on our website at goodleadership.com. Here's how the 7 F's wheel works. Each one of the spokes has a 1 in the middle and a 10 at the top. And that represents your satisfaction. All we do is ask you to articulate how satisfied are you. 1 means it couldn't be any worse. 10 means it couldn't be any better. And when you do that, you connect the dots and you find out what the shape of your 7 F's wheel is. Now, it's fair to assume the goal here is to make sure that your wheel is round and rolls. But if you have all 2s, that would be exhausting. It would roll. That's not the goal. The goal is to have a wide, expansive 7 F's wheel because the wheel is the symbol of momentum in physics. And when you just know this, if you're satisfied on the important things in your life as measured by the 7 F's, you just give off this radiant, positive energy. And that's a huge component of what we call goodness. As we head for home here, I'm about to entertain some questions, but I do have a couple of takeaways. And as there's some themes that have come across in coaching both individual executives and their executive teams. And the first one is, if you're trying to do something important, something bigger than you can do yourself, you know you need a team. But sometimes people who are on your team don't actually know they're on your team. So I would ask you, who is your team? Do they know it? How can you lead with encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork in a way that actually makes their life better? That's what thrive together means. The next one is this. We all know what's coming here living in the bold north of Minnesota. Right now we're dining outside and walking outside and doing things that kind of fulfill our souls and keep us happy during COVID. But the reality is it's going to get cold and we're going to go inside soon. And we're going to need to take care of ourselves. And I really think that our clients who have taken this 7 F's idea seriously, they're really, really proud to show the picture of their 7 F's wheel because it means they're not letting all this get them down. They're playing offense, they're developing themselves, and it really does help us stay more resilient. And I think that's important, excuse me, because of the last question here. And that the idea here is that we learn to find the goodness in everything. With that dark noise just consuming so much of our lives, real leaders, good leaders, know how to not lie to themselves and not find hyperbole, but to actually find goodness in everything. When you hear the word pivot, it means that people are accepting the challenges, accepting the things that are happening differently in our world, and then finding new ways to find good things to build on and go in a different direction. It's no question in my mind that Rotary is still surviving because they pivoted to Zoom meetings, and that's just a perfect example. So, who's your team? Do they know you're on your team? Can you help them take care of themselves on the 7 F's? And can you lead in such a way where you find the goodness in everything? If you liked any of this information, this book is available at goodleadership.com, and I'm happy to send you the slides or any information you want if you send me a note at paul@goodleadership.com. I'm sorry for the cough today. It's just a little dry in here. I had a COVID test last week. I'm about to become a grandpa. And so I know for a fact that at least as of this weekend, I don't have the COVID, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm curious to find out if anyone has any questions or observations they'd like to share. I think we have a couple of minutes. And Jenny, if there's anything that you expected me to say today, maybe you can remind me of something I might have left out.
Paul, I wonder if you might actually go through and ask the questions around the 7 F's wheel. Those are really good, how we define those, each of those areas.
Yep, I'll go back right there, sure. So, in the early days when I started talking about the 7 F's wheel, people would say, you know what, I don't want to talk about faith. It's not something that's okay in my workplace. But faith in this context is embracing what the ancient Chinese and the Egyptians figured out 4,000 years ago, which is the highest performing leaders have a connection between mind, body, and spirit. Spiritual life and faith means different things to many different people. I'm not asking who you worship, do you worship, why or why not. That's none of my business. But acknowledging that we respond to really important things in our life often in a faith-based way, it's important to be satisfied with how your faith life is. Family is very complex these days. You know, I for one, had 3 adult kids move back into my house, 2 who are married once COVID started. Now they've pretty much gone away, except for last night, the 24-year-old came home again. My mother's living in assisted living. I have a sister who's in the hospital today. I mean, I'm about to be a grandpa. Family is very complicated, but really, really important. We're learning that through COVID for sure. Finances is not about how much you have in your pocket or your portfolio. What finances is about is how well does your money fund your priorities? Because that's really what counts, especially if we're really living in the moment and making sure that we're being responsible philanthropists and caring for our families. It's how well does your money fund your priorities? Fitness is about the health of your body. I'm not proud to say that before COVID, I could button my sport coats, and now I can't. That's just part of the deal. I'm keeping up my wind and my strength. I play a lot of golf, but gosh darn it, I have to figure out how to drop a few pounds to get my clothes to fit again. Friends, these are the people who share your joys and disappointments. And I can tell you, we've invested a lot in the Botts household on friends. And I'm happy to say I got a 10 on friends today. And it's been a long time since I could say that. Fun is the part of our life that's playful and joyful. I'm one of those lucky human beings where so much of my fun comes from my work. And then finally, future. It's the hope that we have for ourselves and others. So again, 7 F's. Faith at the beginning, future at the end, fitness in the middle. And when you do this exercise, it's just wonderful to see, you know, where you're at this moment in time in your life. It gives you a chance to work on very specific things that we know are going to make a big difference. So Jenny, I hope that helped.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anyone else? Question or comment?
I have a comment. This is great. I really wish that I'm gonna, right now, you know, I'm looking at compelling plan. We have a profits together. I have to do better, but I think I'm doing pretty good. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is something that I think I'm just gonna use this to look at my business to see how can we go with this. I think in the future, you're in the right place, because I think our future really is based on how we're gonna be leader and running our business to be successful. And this is a very good formula. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And the you can get the book off Amazon, but it's really been very, very successful. I'm really proud of that work. Any other comments or questions?
I have one, if that's okay. This is Mary Jo. Thank you so much. I love this. You obviously have a great positive attitude. You should join our Optimist Club. We have a Roseville Area Optimist Club. I don't know if you've been to our meetings, but this is great.
I've spoken to a lot of Optimist meetings.
And you spoke to our Optimist? I missed your meet. I missed it when you spoke to us. I love it. I'm wondering, so you're optimistic. I think I'm optimistic. Other people are. When you have people who are not optimistic in your life, who find this really difficult, tips can you give for us to help them be more, be following this? Like, what if they go and look on the wheel? Well, I'm rounded, but I'm a 2 on everything. At least I'm a round wheel, but I'm 2. So that's not healthy either. So
No.
if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, pardon the cough again. Well, I'll answer from a coaching perspective. The only way you can move somebody to a new place is to meet them where they're at. But that doesn't mean you have to pile on. If somebody really does have all 2s, we can say, okay, which one of these 7 things will be the easiest to get a 3?
Okay.
You can't let people dwell on things that they are overly focused on that are negative, because when we dwell on it or we let them do that, it just adds more weight. It starts to slide. So what we do as coaches, we ask, what would need to be true for you to actually think that a compelling plan was worth it, or anything on the 7 Fs. You can't convince somebody who looks at the glass half empty that the only way to look at it is glass as half full. What we can do is to keep talking until we find something where they express positivity and go, hey, there's one. How about another? Now, I have some people in my life and some clients who've hired us because they naturally look at the world from a downside. And so you have to meet them where they're at, listen to how they're assessing things, and then find that one kernel to start going in the positive direction. That's a really, really good question. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
I find it interesting that you focused right away with your dark noise. And as far as the dark noise goes, that was basically a loss of trust in a whole array of different things that we normally depend on as citizens. As you start to go through your goodness things, what that's basically doing is just reinstating that trust in all the different elements of our life that help us move forward.
Yes.
There's one of our earlier speakers wrote a book called The Trust Edge.
Oh yeah, Dave Horst, I know him.
Yeah, and so that's where I'm drawing a lot of my things from the trust factor. But I think this is really a good way to help reestablish that trust. And of course, the same concept in the trust factor is when you have good trust, then it's much easier to move forward and get things done in an expeditious manner.
Yeah. I left out probably the most important thing about the dark noise, which was just silly of me. And that is that as we've lost trust in all these big institutions, what's happening is that we're really counting on our workplaces and our local communities and our schools to be that source of goodness. People are diverting their attention into things they are invested in and involved in and have a little bit of control over. And I think as business people, we really have, small businesses especially, we have to generate goodness on a day-to-day basis if we're going to expect to compete and thrive. And I think most people that we talk with are up to that challenge.
Can you stay longer?
Yes, I can.
One moment. Can you just have your hand up for quite some time? So we'll take that last question. And then, Paul, you said you can stay a little bit later?
Yes, I can.
I have one quick
No,
question.
yeah, I got to call on Khadija. She's had her hand up for a long time.
Okay.
Did we lose her?
Khadija, you're still muted. I don't know if.
Yes, hi. I guess I lost the question. But anyway, in the big scheme of things, which is where I'm trying to look at things right now, our definitions of good, I was just wondering about that. Since you're staying longer, maybe I'll stay on as well. But the other thing that you said that caught on me was that no need to pile on just because there's a disagreement. I really, really agree with that. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. How would you like to proceed? Do you want to close your meeting and have me hang on a little bit longer, or do you want to just go a few minutes more?
Yeah, if you would hang on after we close, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, well, happy to do it.